What you really want is this 1 cubic foot microwave oven that's half the size of what you currently make. And literally, the vice president of marketing got up from the other end of the table, walked down to me, grabbed me by the elbow, and escorted me to the security station to show me out of the building. This is the truth. 18 months later, Sanyo introduced a 1 cubic foot microwave oven, which is now 80% of the microwave oven market. Okay? I didn't know it was that important, but they refused to look at it. And I think that's part of the issue. So, innovation starts with an open mind. It's fed by information and is created by identifying and embracing conflicts. And this is something that I think is critically important. A lot of companies, when they run into a problem, at least most of the people that I've worked with in companies, they run into a problem, they do the best they can kind of to pretend it's not a problem, okay? You know, if you can sweep it under, I won't say the rug because you can't get it under the carpet anymore, but if you can sweep it under the table, or if you can suppress it, or if you can pretend it's not a big deal, it's actually true that 5 out of 10 will probably go away. But it's the other 5 that bite people. And the other 5 really are the opportunities for innovation. Because when you have a conflict is when you have something that needs a resolution. You have something that needs to be resolved. You have to apply a creative process to it to solve that problem, to find out what the needs are and solve it. So I argue that conflict are an incredibly important part. Identifying conflict is an important part of being innovative. One of the things that most people in business don't really quite grasp, and that's part of this issue, is that innovation and creativity are literally the antithesis of efficiency. They are the antithesis of being in control. They are going to do nothing for your spreadsheet. Okay? They are not going to help you make a good argument until 6 to 9 months later. So that's one of the problems, is innovation requires creativity, which requires encouraging and manipulating chaos. Okay, what you really want to do is you want to make some chaos in the group that you're working with. You want to get people to do really dumb stuff. You want to get people to make mistakes. You want to get people to say things that they really are uncomfortable saying and throwing out ideas that they're uncomfortable with. If innovation is successful, it's the implementation of creative activity. And to do that, you need to know yourself well. Your company needs to understand its culture. It needs to understand its processes. It needs to be willing to be introspective. Okay, now it's hard enough as individuals to be introspective. As a company, it gets just as tough, if not tougher. But it's really important if you want to bring creativity and innovation to play. So, I'm going to try to just go through a couple of points of what this process could involve. It's not a stage gate program. It's not voice of the customer with matrices in 8 different directions. Okay? It's just a list of stuff to do. One of the most important things to determine for your culture is what's the right balance of incremental innovation versus dramatic innovation that your firm needs or can use. There are some companies that, really can't handle the truth. They can't handle big innovations. It's just not going to work for them. So they can incrementally get to that big innovation, but they have to do it in a couple of steps. Other companies are, wow, let's jump and give it a shot. Learning how to investigate your market to find user needs and conflicts is a major issue. What you have to learn how to do is get past your salespeople. Okay? Salespeople are not good researchers because their instinct is to convince somebody to buy something. Their instinct is to convince somebody that what you're offering is the right thing. They're not there saying, tell me everything that's wrong, because that won't get them a sale. So don't use your, that's just an indication. I could get off on that for a while, so I'll try not to. Another thing that's important is to determine what you don't know. One of the hardest things, obviously, and this is an old cliche, you don't know what you don't know. And one of the difficulties in doing being innovative is understanding that information you have to get in order to solve and resolve your conflict. You can also find out what kind of innovation process best fits your culture. And probably one of the best examples of the contrast is Jobs and Gates. Okay? There are people who really question whether Apple will survive when Jobs doesn't, because he is such a directive, influential, creative, dynamic force for innovation in that company. They hope that they've put enough of the right people in place to be able to pick it up when he drops it. Gates, on the other hand, made this huge organization that, though he was a driver and really hard to deal with and was a control freak, he delegated all over the place and really made everybody semi-autonomous. And as a result, his organization's doing just fine while he's off giving away everything he's made, which is really great. Anyway, so determining what your culture can manage is important. One of the ways you do that, and you can do this yourself or you can hire somebody else to do it, but it's a talent you need to learn. And it's a term that I've kind of coined that I call sincere irreverence. And what it is you need to learn how to ask really irreverent questions, but with the trust that the reason you're asking it is to achieve a positive end. Okay? That you sincerely care enough, you know, to look under the table and find the conflict and try to resolve it. Another thing you can do is design an environment that enables design thinking. Everybody, you know, engineers are taught deductive thinking, okay? Inductive thinking is where you're bringing lots of things from lots of places and pushing them through the process at the same time. It's disorganized, it's chaotic, but it's not sequential. You know, you will trip over every stage gate if you do that kind of stuff, okay? But it really does help you imagine new things. What you do need to do is develop an innovation portfolio. That means there are going to be some small innovations that help you, there are going to be some large ones that you're going for, and you need to create the balance and find out what that balance is going to be. You can have your personnel trained by learning, doing, reflecting on what they've done and correcting their process, and learn how to use sincere irreverence to achieve what I would call responsible innovation. Okay? And to my mind, responsible innovation is not new for new, because that's what makes landfills. Okay? What innovation is successful creativity that provides a product that helps both you and your customers be sustainable. Okay? So I just reached out a little further there, but I'll pull it back in. You can do that by reviewing suggestions, improvement existing processes, finding out what your existing processes are and changing them helps, determining whether you should embrace the visionary leadership, challenging tradition and assumptions, mindsets, outdated ways of doing things is really critical. And the easiest way to do that is just ask why we're doing it that way. Okay, yes, this is our process. Here's this sheet of paper. Here's the spreadsheet we have to fill out to make this happen. And why are we doing that? Another thing you need to do is identify and eliminate silos and counterproductive politics and territoriality. Okay? You need to raise the bar for trust, communication, teamwork, experimentation, and the willingness to learn from mistakes and to make mistakes. And this is really just a process that I outlined just to throw at you quickly because I've been talking too long already. And if somebody wants a copy of this, I'm happy to give it to you. But this is actually not very much different than a regular product development process, except that you're going through it before you do your product development process. Okay? And so at this point, it really becomes you've gone through all these issues, you've laid out this framework for being creative in your company, and you've identified a couple of innovations you want to try to explore, and that's when you need to talk to people like Jim. Just as a couple of examples of successes, because now I've made all this noise about how you should do this wonderful stuff. To give you some historical examples, and I'll do them very quickly. Has anybody ever seen this before? This is the Edmund Scientific Telescope. It was designed in 1976. In 2006, it was considered a consumer's best buy at $10 more than it was originally sold for. Okay? Edmund Scientific, and then whoever owns it next, has been selling that product at a clip of about 10,000 units a year for 76, almost 40 years. Okay? That's a reasonably successful product. And that was an innovation that came out of a team trying to figure out how to solve the problem of an inexpensive mount for people for telescopes, for amateurs. And then there are little innovations, like how do you go to point of sale and come up with a bright color that somebody's going to notice that doesn't wreck their night vision when they take their eye away from the eyepiece? Red is the only color that does that. Okay, Zenith Products Company is down south of here. They manufacture plastic bath accessories. This was an opportunity that they actually got into the buyer at JCPenney. JCPenney was manufacturing styrene $3.99 toothbrush holders. And they were selling somebody's toothbrush holders, and there was a product range. And we got to talk to the buyer, and it turns out what people really wanted was something that was like ceramic, but that they could drop on the floor. So what we were able to design for them was a line of bathroom accessories that were injection molded in ABS, so you could put them in the dishwasher. If you put the styrene in the dishwasher, the dryer would just melt it to the bottom. In ABS, you can dishwash them, and they have all the forms and shapes of ceramic, and you can drop them on the floor. What ended up happening was they went from 150,000 units a year to 1.5 million units a year in 22 different colors to match all the towels they sold. And that went on for 5 years, 2 years longer than a normal consumer product introduction. Southgo is another company south of here, no pun intended. And this is a sealed lever latch that we developed for them. It was designed initially to go on the outside of campers, so that when you're fishing around for extra blankets in the dark, you don't catch your pajamas and tear them on the handle sticking out the side, so it's kind of flat. But what you can do is you can feel the lump in the middle of it, which is where the button is that you push that springs it open, and you use it for a handle to open the door. Turns out they ended up using it as a trunk latch in the back of Ferraris. So it got this huge, widespread global success that we really didn't expect, and did real well. This is the last one I'm going to show before I turn it over to Jim. This is really, I think, a great innovation story for this company. Vidar was a company that made large document scanners. And if you think about the large document scanning business, it kind of puts itself out of business. Right? Large documents, you scan them, they're digitized, you never got to scan them again. And sooner or later, you're not going to make any new ones, so you start running out of documents to scan. So the question is, what do you do with this technology? And they determined, I won't say we did, they determined that they wanted to consider the medical market for scanning x-rays. And we worked with them, and we went into hospitals and found out what all the issues were and what the user needs were. And we found out that most of the x-ray scanners at the time were like big copy machines with this mechanism that goes back and forth on top of a counter. It took about 4 feet and the whole depth of the counter. And we